What is good, everybody? Welcome back to another episode brought to you by the League FFB. Today, we're going to be talking about 3 wide receiver matchups I like this week and 3 wide receiver matchups I don't like this week. So without wasting any more time, let's hop right into the guys that I like. Now, the first matchup that I want to talk about as a smash play this week is going to be Puka Nacua for the Los Angeles Rams, and he gets a matchup this week against the Arizona Cardinals. And I know, Puka Nacua isn't like the flashiest or the most shocking of must starts, but Puka Nacua should be started no matter what in your fantasy football leagues this week. A lot of people were worried about what was going to happen once Cooper Kupp came back into the lineup. What was that going to look like for Puka Nacua? And last week, Puka put up 71 yards on 11 targets, 7 catches to go along with that, and a touchdown. Finished as a top 12 wide receiver in PPR leagues last week anyways. So I don't think it really matters if Cooper Kupp is in the lineup. Puka Nacua is still going to continue to be a smash play, and I think he's a top 10 play at the wide receiver position this week. Now, the second player that I like this week is going to be Calvin Ridley for the Jacksonville Jaguars, and he gets a matchup against the Indianapolis Colts. And keep in mind, the Indianapolis Colts are giving up 31.9 fantasy points per game to the wide receiver position, which is the 9th easiest matchup in football right now. And over the last couple weeks, it's been pretty inconsistent for Calvin Ridley. He finished as the wide receiver 6 in week 1, and then he had a lot of finishes where he was outside of the top 30. Last week in week 5 against the Buffalo Bills, he finished as a top 10 wide receiver again. To me, I think this week against the Indianapolis Colts, it's going to be a top 15 finish for Calvin Ridley. Like I said, the matchup is good, and I think that the Jags are starting to get rolling just a little bit more each and every week. They did beat the Buffalo Bills last week, so good things on the horizon, and Calvin Ridley is a must start for me this week. Now, the third and final wide receiver that I'm going to be starting in my lineups this week is going to be DJ Moore for the Chicago Bears. And DJ Moore, he gets to play the Minnesota Vikings, and the Minnesota Vikings have been giving up 38.2 fantasy points per game to the wide receiver position, which is the 4th easiest matchup in fantasy football right now for wide receivers. And as we look at the last couple weeks for DJ Moore, 2 weeks in a row now where DJ Moore has finished as a top 5 wide receiver for fantasy football. Justin Fields, this Bears offense, they're starting to get rolling. DJ Moore is starting to get hyper targeted. He had 9 targets in week 4, 10 targets in week 5, touchdowns in those games. In fact, he scored in the last 3 weeks for the Bears, and I think it's going to continue rolling. Like I said, the Vikings don't have a great defense against wide receivers this year, and maybe DJ Moore and Justin Fields go in and they beat my Minnesota Vikings. It's in the range of outcomes, but I think DJ Moore is going to be a top 20 play at the wide receiver position this week. A wide receiver 2 is the floor for him, and I'll be starting him in my leagues. And now that we've talked about the 3 wide receivers that I like, let's talk about 3 wide receiver matchups that I don't like and that I would be cautious about in my fantasy football leagues. The first matchup being Deebo Samuel. I don't like his matchup this week against the Cleveland Browns. The Cleveland Browns have been the single toughest matchup to fantasy football wide receivers so far this year. They're only giving up 13.5 fantasy points per game to the wide receiver position. And when we look at what Deebo Samuel has been doing the last couple weeks, it's kind of been hot and cold for Deebo Samuel over the last couple weeks. Wide receiver 36 week 1, then a top 12 finish, a top 10 finish, wide receiver 124, and then he finished outside of the top 25 here in week 5 against the Dallas Cowboys. It does seem like the San Francisco 49ers are probably the best team in football right now. They've been humming all season long, but I think right now what I'm noticing for fantasy football is that really 2 of these receiving options can be relevant each game, and that third guy kind of seems to get left out. So it does seem like it's either Brandon Ayuk and George Kittle, or it's Ayuk and Deebo, or it's one or the other, right? One of these guys is getting left out no matter what each week. I like Ayuk. I think he's the wide receiver 1. Who knows what George Kittle does against the Cleveland Browns, but I don't like Deebo Samuel in fantasy football leagues this week. I think he's going to finish outside of my top 25 wide receivers right now, and really he's going to be touchdown dependent. The second matchup that I'll strongly consider sitting this week is going to be Tyler Lockett. He gets to play the Cincinnati Bengals, and the Cincinnati Bengals have been surprisingly good against fantasy football wide receivers this year. They're only giving up about 26.5 points per game to the wide receiver position, so it's been so far really one of the brighter spots of the Bengals so far this season. Obviously, they haven't been great on offense until last week when they played the Arizona Cardinals, but when we look at what Tyler Lockett has done for fantasy football so far this year, he only has 1 finish in the top 10, and then everything else outside of that has been outside of the top 40. So it's either he's been really good, and really that week was when he scored 2 touchdowns, or he's been pretty bad for fantasy football. The Seattle Seahawks, they are not passing the football a lot. I don't expect them to change that going into week 6 of the fantasy football season. The Bengals have been a pretty good matchup against wide receivers, and so for that, I think that Tyler Lockett is going to finish outside of the top 30. Currently have him outside of the top 30 in my ranks, and he's somebody that I would consider benching this week if I don't have to play him. Now, the third and final player that I'm going to be sitting in my fantasy football leagues this week is going to be Tank Dell for the Houston Texans, and he plays the New Orleans Saints. They've been a very good matchup against the wide receiver position as well, only giving up about 26.7 points to that position so far this year, and Nico Collins has been very, very good for this team. Tank Dell, he's been good as well. And when we look at what Tank Dell has done so far this year, he has 1 finish inside of the top 10, 1 inside of the top 20, and then when you look at everything else, he's finished outside of the top 45 in each of those weeks. It really comes down to, is Tank Dell scoring touchdowns or is he not scoring touchdowns? And in this matchup where I think the game pace is going to be a little bit slower, I think that, like I said, the New Orleans Saints have been a good defense against the wide receiver position. I don't know if Tank Dell is going to get the volume, nor is he going to get the touchdown this week, and because of that, I have him currently outside of my top 40 wide receivers, so I will not be playing Tank Dell in fantasy football this week. Now, that is all I have for you guys today. If you did enjoy the video, go ahead and hit that like button. It is the best free way to show our channel some support, so go ahead and do that for us. We really would appreciate it. And also, if you want more content like this, we post content like this every single day. Make sure you're subscribed, make sure you hit the notification bell so you don't miss any of those videos when they come out. And last but not least, go ahead and join my free Discord. It will be linked in the description. Like I said, it is free to join. We talk fantasy football, NFL, waiver questions, trade questions, all of that stuff over there in that Discord. So go join that for me. And with all of that being said, I don't have anything else for you guys today. I will see you in the next one. Peace out.